Good morning. I'm CW4 retired Jason Lill. About 26 years in the Army as a warrant officer pilot. I'm your Master of Ceremonies today. I'd like to welcome everybody. We're going to start with presenting the colors. All rise. Commander of the Guard, post the colors. Command of the Guard, parade rest. Now I'd like to invite Comrade John Fox to please place the POW MIA flag on the empty chair, signifying recognition of those missing in action or who are being held as prisoners of war. I'd like to invite Phil Darmientino, Chaplain, American Legion, to give us the invocation. Chaplains from the Legion Post 84. Thank you, Chaplain.
Gentlemen, please uncover. In this world of unrest, today we honor our veterans, past and present, of all military services, who gave their best when they were called upon to serve and protect our country. The American Legion and the veterans of foreign wars honor them with the following prayer. Almighty God, Father of all mankind and Judge over nations, send thy peace to our nation and to all nations. We pray that you will bless all our veterans, past and present, for their unselfish service and a continual struggle to preserve our country's heritage. Help them observe the strictest justice, keep the fires of freedom alive, strive for the spirit of democracy, and observe loyalty to our country and thee. Finally, O God of mercy, we ask thy blessing and comfort for those comrades who are suffering mental and physical disability. Cheer them and bring them the blessing of health and happiness. God bless America, land of the free, home of the brave. Amen.
Thank you, sir. If you remain standing, lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our next guest is Dave Moore, our soloist that will be leading the Star Spangled Banner. Dave.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Jade. Well, I guess we're ahead of schedule. Should we do the pause now or wait till? Just keep going? Okay. All right. All right. Love it when a plan comes together. This time I'd like to introduce Sean Askman, Selectman, and also State Senator Lisa Simnara. Thank you for coming. And then we also have, we'll start with Sean as greetings from the town. Thank you. Sorry.
So as everybody just saw, I get a little excited for the speech and then back, and it's, forgive me, after 12 years, I'm still figuring it out. On behalf of the town of Simsbury, First Selectman Max Studis, the entire Board of Selectmen, including Heather Getz and Chris Peterson, who are here today, thank you sincerely to all of our Simsbury veterans and all veterans across America today. I continue to be humbled by all folks that I meet throughout this tenure, this journey of public service, but none more than the folks that I see here today and that I've met through the years. Our veterans have exhibited phenomenal bravery, phenomenal valor, and I, am so thankful to have experienced just a small part of your lives, your stories, and your struggles that you've brought back, but contributed to our community in so many meaningful ways. Not only through ceremonies, but through hard work, through business, through schools, through education, through family, and through so many volunteer activities. It's one of the greatest things I've gotten to experience as a member of the Board of Selectmen, and one that I'm truly thankful for. Your service and sacrifice is inspiring to all of us, and we're truly better off because of all of you. So thank you.
And sorry about that. Next, I'd like to introduce State Senator Lisa Simnara. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having me this morning to help commemorate this day. Today is a day we gather to honor the brave men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. It is a day of reflection, gratitude, and remembrance, a time to come together and pay tribute to those who selflessly defended the ideals and freedoms we hold dear. To the veterans among us, thank you. Thank you for your bravery and love for our country that goes beyond personal interest. You and your contributions serve as inspiration for generations to come. Let us also give praise to your families. They have endured separation, uncertainty, while always being the source of strength and support. On this Veterans Day, let us never forget the price that was paid for our civil liberties. Let us stand united and always strive to honor their legacy by upholding the values that make our country strong and free. Thank you for having me today, and may God bless America and the struggling world around us.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Dave Moore back again to lead us in God Bless America.
I'm actually going to sing America the Beautiful. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesty above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, may God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years, thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, America, may God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Veterans Day, to me, is one of the most important things that we recognize our service members. Selfless acts, commitment to service. When I was 17 years old, signing that dotted line, I'm not sure really what I was up for. And I wouldn't change the world. I signed before I graduated from high school, and my parents were okay with it for some reason. But you look back in history at World War II, World War I, and even the Civil War, there was kids that were 15, 16 years old lying to serve their country. So I just want to let you know that it's still kind of a thing today, even when you're not even 18 years old, to volunteer and be part of one of the greatest military forces in the world and in history. And I'm proud to be amongst my colleagues here that did the same thing. Now, if we could just take a moment, there's a little bit of history. At 11 a.m., we're going to pause to remember the needs to interrupt any other activity. The speeches and announcement, we're going to continue on. A moment of silence will be held in remembrance of the armistice of the 11th hour, the 11th day, and of the 11th month. And in about 2 seconds, we're going to do that. So, a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Thank you. Continuing with the program, I'd like to invite Kelly Crowley, perspective on Veterans Day. Dan was not an ordinary veteran. From the perspective of Dan's widow, Kelly Crowley, Dan was a U.S. Army soldier, Army Air Corps stationed in the Philippines when World War II started. He was either fighting the Japanese or a POW for the entire war. Dan never gave up, and he applied that mindset in his days as a POW and in his career in sales at the Northwest Mutual Life Insurance and a life in general. Let's welcome Kelly Crowley.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here to speak today of my favorite veteran, my husband, Dan Crowley. Many of you here knew Dan, I'm sure, and probably also listened to many of his speeches, so you probably have a real good idea of who Dan was and what he represented and what he endured and went through. When I first met Dan, the very first time, he was wearing his Battling Bastards of Bataan hat. And I thought I knew about that. I was like, oh, okay. I knew of the Bataan Death March and the suffering and what they went through. But boy, I really had no idea. I learned a lot over the years by witnessing dozens of interviews that Dan did. So, first of all, Dan was not, he escaped the Bataan Death March. But what that all represents was a very small part of that whole experience that he and all his other fellow servicemen went through. There was about 35,000 of them over in the Philippines before the war. And they fought 4 to 5 months holding off the Japanese, who were well-trained, well-armed, and had reinforcements. The U.S. did not have any reinforcements. They had dwindling supplies, starvation rations. They started to get half rations and quarter rations. Anyways, for them to hold off 4 to 5 months, the Imperial Japanese Army was quite an incredible feat to begin with. And then they were already starved and diseased before they were even surrendered. And as Dan would remind you, they were all surrendered. They did not surrender individually. They were surrendered by their country. They had no reinforcements, no way. They held out for as long as they could. And then Dan escaped the Bataan Death March because the day that Bataan was surrendered, he and several hundred others refused the order. Dan did not follow the order to surrender. Surprise, surprise. So they hid out in the breakwater and waited for nightfall to swim across Manila Bay to the island of Corregidor, about 3 miles out in the bay. And therefore, they did not go on the infamous Bataan Death March. They swam to Corregidor, and as soon as they got there, they became Marines. So then Dan was part of the Marine Regiment, 4th Marines. He was attached to that, and they held off another month before that was surrendered also. So then that began their 3.5 years of brutal manual slave labor. All of this I had no idea of before I met Dan. So I'm grateful that I was able to witness so many interviews that he did over the years. It's really amazing that any of them made it home. Not only was Dan not ordinary, all those guys that were with him were not ordinary. Not an ordinary person would be able to go through what they went through. For example, there was roughly 30 to 35,000 POWs of Japan. But at the end of the war, only 17,000 plus made it home. 40 to 45% death rate of the POWs in Japan, as opposed to the 4 to 5 times more POWs, 120,000, 150,000 over in Europe, and their death rate was roughly 1%. So, for perspective, for any of those guys to have made it home was a miracle, was amazing to begin with. So Dan began his 3.5 years of slave labor. He was sent to the island of Palawan in the Philippines to construct an airfield. Took 18 months constructing an airfield out of primeval jungle with only manual hand tools. About 300 POWs and with him constructed this airfield for 18 months. Luckily, Dan, after the airfield was finished, was shipped back to Manila to then go to Japan to labor in the mines in Japan. And I say luckily because the 150 that were left behind were massacred on December 14th, 1944. They were thrown into air raid shelters. Well, they were ordered into air raid shelters, doused with gasoline, and set afire with torches. And the few who came out were machine gunned down, and amazingly, 11 survived to be able to tell the story. So Dan was not part of that. He escaped that. Also, Dan then got in a hell ship to get to Japan. And he was lucky, again, to be in a hell ship that was one of the first waves of ships going to Japan. Because towards the end, near the end of the war, U.S. had gained the airspace, air control over the area and was bombing everything in the area. And the Japanese did not mark their ships with POWs. So many of the POWs who died under the Japanese actually died by friendly fire. U.S. was bombing everything. They were unmarked as having POWs aboard, and many of them died by being bombed from our own military. So Dan was lucky to get to Japan by escaping the bombings of the hell ships, and he toiled for 18 more months underground, 2,000 feet down below in small tunnels in the mines, 12 to 16-hour days, getting up before the sun rose to go off to the mines, and coming out of the mines at the end of the day after the sun had gone down. Here's a little side note that I don't want to forget about, is I just have to tell this story because it's so cool. Earlier this year, January, I signed up for a tour, Valor Tours out of San Francisco, to go to the Philippines to see all the places Dan had been. Bataan, Corregidor, Palawan, and Cabanatuan, the first POW camp. So I signed up in January. In February, I got contacted through the internet, emails, indirectly anyways, from a guy from Savannah, Georgia, who was in the Philippines in February, searching around on Corregidor. He liked to do treasure hunting for World War II relics, and he found Dan's dog tag. He found Dan's dog tag in what he described as a hand-dug tunnel on Corregidor Island in the Philippines, and contacted me indirectly and was able to send me the dog tag that I have here in March, and I was able to have it with me when I went to the Philippines in April. So that was just an amazing, about 80, almost 81 years after Dan lost his dog tag on Corregidor, it was found. And the timing was just impeccable because I was going to the Philippines. It was just amazing. Anyways, Dan was not an ordinary veteran by any stretch. None of them were that made it home with him. They had to have sheer determination, incredible will to live. And a little luck, or a lot of luck along the way. But I believe Dan was spared because he was meant to come home and advocate. He had a lifetime commitment of talking, speaking, interviewing, advocating for the fellow veterans. The fellow veterans that were in his predicament, but all veterans in general. I witnessed many interviews he did, many speeches. He was invited to speak all over the country. We went to San Francisco, Punch Bowl in Hawaii. He was interviewed in Virginia many times, invited on the USS Baton to speak. But he was a great, great speaker. He was the voice for the voiceless, the guys that never made it home. He was also the voice for those who were stopped from speaking way too soon, the guys that died when they came home too. They didn't live very long. In fact, the first year that they got home, of the 17,000 plus that actually made it home, the first year they were home, 25% of them died in the first year. So they had a very tough time. Most of them didn't live very long. So that Dan wasn't not only not ordinary, he was extraordinary in the fact that he lived to 99 plus. He was one of very few Japanese POWs who made it into their 90s and beyond. And in those last 10 years of his life, I witnessed many, many interviews. And he was always advocating not just for the fellow POWs that he was serviced with, but also just veterans in general. I saw him, he organized an event to commemorate Midway. Anything to do with veterans, military, Dan was always ready and willing to be supportive and to be there. So we're here today not just for Dan, but for all veterans. And I want to thank all veterans for all your service, your sacrifice, all you did for this country. And I have such a greater appreciation and gratitude because of my veteran, Dan Crowley. I thank you all for being here. I thank you, veterans, for your service, not just today, but every day. I am very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Great. That's great. Now from the Talcott Mountain Highlanders, Amazing Grace. Next, we'll have VFW Post 1926 Annual Community Service Awards presented by John Fox and John Lanham. Gentlemen.
Good morning and welcome. Thank you all for coming. Veterans Day is a time for us to pay our respects to the men and women who served in America's armed forces. We celebrate and honor them for their patriotism, love of country, and willingness to serve. But there are others who deserve our thanks for their willingness to serve, and those are the first responders in the town of Simsbury. In past years, we used to contact these organizations and ask them to give us the name of an individual who, for longevity or service or whatever reason, stood out and was deserving of a recognition. And we would present that individual with a framed certificate of appreciation. Then the pandemic came and life changed for all of us. And while we were all home, most of us home, quarantining for a period of months, our first responders showed up to work every day and did their job and faced the risk of the COVID virus. The Simsbury Police Department, the Simsbury Volunteer Fire Company, and the Simsbury Volunteer Ambulance Association deserve our appreciation and recognition today. And I'd like to stress the word volunteer. There are 90 active men and women who are volunteers in the fire company. There are 35 men and women who are active participants in the fire company auxiliary. The Ambulance Association has over a dozen volunteer EMTs and have been dependent upon volunteers since its inception in 1957. Volunteers are people who choose to enter of their own free will. And that can be said also for the police department. These men and women have chosen of their own free will to take the training to become a police officer and serve their communities. When the 911 call goes out, the police department is dispatched immediately. We see the lights, we hear the sirens, we pause, we watch them go by, and return to our normal life. Some of us wondering, gee, I wonder what that was for. Could be a traffic accident, could be a medical emergency, could be crime in the process. We don't know. But they face that danger, face that situation every day, looking at the unknown and dealing with whatever happens. The police are required to assess the situation and ensure the safety of the other responding units. So today we want to recognize and show our appreciation to the entire Simsbury Police Department, the entire Simsbury Volunteer Fire Company, and the entire Simsbury Volunteer Ambulance Association by awarding them a plaque, commemorative plaque. The Law Enforcement Award presented to Simsbury Police Department in grateful recognition of unyielding adherence to the highest ideals of law enforcement in maintaining and preserving and protecting the lawful rights of all citizens, awarded by the Veterans of Foreign Wars, VFW Post 1926. Deputy Chief Davis. The Firefighter Award is presented to the Simsbury Volunteer Fire Company. The special recognition and highest praise for alertness, personal courage, and ever-vigilant guardianship of life and property by the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States, VFW Post 1926. Chief James Baldus. And the First Responder Award, presented to the Simsbury Volunteer Ambulance Association. in special recognition of exemplary service to humanity, selfless devotion to mankind, and ever-vigilant guardianship of life by the Veterans of Foreign Wars post-1926. Is Brian Clancy here, Board President of the Vandalists Association. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'd like to introduce our next guest. She's been at many of these events. Introducing Debbie Payne. She's honorary regent of the Abigail Phillips chapter of the Daughters of American Revolution. Debbie, welcome. She'll be talking about the wreaths across America.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm last, so I'm going to try and go fast. You're cold, I know. I'm here to invite everyone to Simsbury's 2023 Wreaths Across America ceremony to be held on National Wreaths Across America Day, Saturday, December 16th at noon in the cemetery on Plank Hill Road. This will be the 15th year that Abigail Phelps chapter, assisted by VFW Post 1926 and American Legion Post 84, will conduct this beautiful 30-minute ceremony. You may support the mission of Wreaths Across America by purchasing a wreath that will be placed on the grave of a specified veteran buried in the cemetery, or you may purchase one to be placed on the grave of an unspecified veteran that would otherwise be without a wreath, or you may order one to just be picked up after the ceremony. $5 of each wreath sale is donated to a veteran cause. And thanks to your generosity and the strong community support with wreath sponsorships, we've been able to place thousands of remembrance wreaths on the graves of our veterans and donate thousands of dollars to various veteran causes over the years. Wreaths Across America is a nonprofit organization that relies heavily on volunteers. But after decades of keeping the price of a wreath to $15, they've raised the price this year to $17 per wreath. I have order forms here today, or you can pick one up in the flyer boxes. There's a box in front of the main entrance there to the cemetery on Hot Meadow, and another one up on Plank Hill Road. The mission of Wreaths Across America is to remember the fallen, honor those who served or are serving, and to teach our children the value of freedom. The 2023 theme is Serve and Succeed. The focus is on the storylines of veterans and military families who have found success through their own service, and highlighting local volunteers across our country and the success that comes from serving their communities. We are here today to remember and honor those who served, but how do we ensure that the next generation will appreciate, respect, and honor the men and women of our military and their service and sacrifices? How do we inspire them to find ways to serve their community and country in the future? Well, in keeping with the Wreaths Across America military storylines theme, this is a great time to remember and share with your children or grandchildren the story of a family member, maybe a great-grandfather or a grandfather or a grandmother or uncle or a cousin who served our country but is no longer here to tell their story. You could share photos if you have them. Maybe your family would like to sponsor a wreath in their honor. And Thanksgiving, when families get together, is a great time to remember these veterans. Education and curriculum for our children is always changing, but one thing never changes. It's the family, the parents and grandparents who are the primary teachers of life's most important and lasting lessons. It's our actions and the examples that we set that shape the values and nurtures patriotism in the next generation. It's a big job during an extremely challenging time for our country. But we're here today because our parents and grandparents were able to do it in some pretty tough times. We can do it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Next will be taps. Please rise. Thank you, John Zuniski and Ellie Bailon. Thanks. Or Eli. Next, John, please retire the POW-MIA cover. I'd like to thank the Scout Troop 76 Color Guard and our Veteran Color Guard members, John Cashman, John Bloom, Aaron Feldman, Mario Miranda, and Sterling Quimby. This concludes our ceremony. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We hope to see you again soon at the Wreaths Across America and Memorial Day next year. Keep an eye out. Thank you very much for today.